our new chair of CCHL. Welcome. And Matthew Slater as well, so thanks for coming along today. Did you want to just start with the presentation?
I'll maybe make some, just a couple of opening comments, if that's all right.
Yes.
And the first one, this is the first opportunity that I've had to thank you for supporting my appointment as the chair of CCHL. It's coming up to 1 month. It'll be 1 month tomorrow, 4 weeks tomorrow since I took up the role. And I just wanted you to know that I'm totally energised by the opportunity to influence and support informed long-term decision-making around the city's critical infrastructure assets in the best interests of the city and the region and its long-term future. So you may or may not know that I was retired and I've come out of retirement to take up this role. So my sole motivation is how I can support you, support the subsidiaries to make good, informed, long-term decisions in the best interests of the city. I'd also just like to offer an apology for our Acting Chief Executive, Paul Silk, who's currently in Australia as a result of a family bereavement. So we can go straight to the presentation. I thought it might be helpful just to observe a few things from the first month's involvement with CCHL. Firstly, in relation to the quarterly reporting, I understand that there's a review underway so that we can enhance transparency and insight through the quarterly reporting. And Matt, I understand, is talking with Linda and with Bede, and that work is underway, targeting the first quarter of next year, Matt?
Yeah, first quarter of the next financial year.
Yeah, to have a enhanced reporting package in place with those objectives of enhanced transparency and insight. Just in relation to the FY 25-27 dividend projection, that's been increased as in line with the request that was received from council for CCHL to see if it could improve the dividends in the early years of the LTP, so the first 3 years. I would note that the previous board had agreed to increase the dividend in those first 3 years, but they hadn't yet determined exactly how they would do that. And so the new board, we've had an opportunity to firstly validate the decision to increase the dividend over the first 3 years, but also to consider how best to do that. And we will do that through changing the debt repayment, the CCHL parent company debt repayment profile over the 10 years of the LTP. So there's been no request of the subsidiaries by us to increase their dividend forecasts. We've managed that issue at the parent company level, and it's simply been done by slowing down our debt repayment in the early years of the 10-year LTP. By the end of the 10 years, we end up in a not dissimilar position. In the original LTP dividend forecast, we were paying down $480 million of debt, and in the revised dividend forecast with the increased dividend in the first 3 years of the LTP, we'll pay down around $450 million. So over the course of that 10 years, we're still making a very significant reduction in the parent company debt, and that parent company debt relates to the special dividends that were paid out in FY 16-19 to support the earthquake recovery. I think it's, I'd also just like to comment on the strategic review that was undertaken, initiated by council and undertaken with CCHL, and that was a very interesting and helpful piece of work, and I believe that there's a real legacy of common understanding from that work that's going to be beneficial for all of us in making good long-term decisions in the best interests of this critical infrastructure and in the best interests of the city and the region. It has given us all a much better understanding of the risks and opportunities that we see over the longer term, and it's that common understanding and also the building of trust and confidence across the group and through to council as the shareholder of CCHL. It's the building of that common understanding and the deepening of it, and the building of that trust and confidence that's going to give us the platform to work really effectively together. The subsidiary companies, CCHL as the holding company, and council as the shareholder. There are some big challenges on the sort of medium to longer term horizon, and I think the ones that stand out for me at this stage, at least, is ensuring that none of the infrastructure becomes a constraint to regional economic growth, and so we need to be looking at that very carefully, and we need to be tracking that carefully. LPC probably looms as the biggest challenge in that regard, and it's an area that we're putting a lot of focus and attention on to deepen our understanding of the demand profile and what implications that has for expansion and over what time frame. So that's an area that we've identified as needing a lot of our attention in the coming months, and we will need to deepen that understanding ourselves, and then we're going to need to assist you in gaining the similar level of understanding of that demand profile and of the expansion implications. The other area that stands out is Orion, and around the asset management plan for Orion over the next 10 years. And there's implications there for the electrification demand, the network development into new areas, and also decarbonisation. So that again will be a priority for us to dive in, get a deeper understanding of the current position and the outlook, and then to work with Orion, work with LPC to ensure that we're on the same page and that we're aligned in what those risks and opportunities are, and that you also have a similar understanding of those matters. So just in summary, in terms of my observations, my focus is going to be twofold really, all centred around engagement. We need to build trust and confidence across the group. Building of trust and confidence takes time, and you have to put a lot of effort and energy into being with people face to face and building relationships. And as we build trust and confidence, we need to deepen that common understanding across the group of what the key risks and opportunities are. And it's those two things combined that will give us the solid foundation upon which to work effectively together in the best interests of the community, the city and the region. I'm happy to pause there if you would like before I go on to the other matters on the slide.
And that would be good. So got Councillor Harrison Hunt had a question.
No, this is just for the rest of the report. The questions will be for the rest of the report.
Okay.
Around the other portfolios. But
Does
kia
anyone
ora,
have
Brian.
any
Just wanted
question
to say welcome and thanks, and I've heard nothing but good things about you. So I'm really excited to be seeing what you do with CCHL and working with you in the future. Kia ora.
Thank you very much.
Just with your comments with regards to Orion and the electrifying and the electric vehicles and other things, but Orion, everything is regulated and capped, so we're going to be expected to invest more and more money into lifting that infrastructure. Is Is there going to be discussion with central government with regards to being able to lift that cap?
Yeah, it's a regulated environment, as you point out, and one of the opportunities is the alignment of the asset management plan and the capital investment to the customised price path. So my understanding is Orion's intention is to negotiate a customised price path so that they can get a stronger connection between the pricing regime and the return on the investment that they need to make across the electrification and expansion into new areas and decarbonisation. Do you want to comment on that, Matt?
Yeah, look, the biggest area of concern that as a result of the draft, the DPP, the price pathway, the default price pathway, relates to that allowance for capital expenditure at the moment, and Orion will be submitting on that and giving feedback as part of that process, which is roughly a 6-month process through until the end of this calendar year, and then subject to the outcomes of that, then they may or may not go down the customised price path.
Because I mean, it's two things, isn't it? One is it's ensuring, as Orion did incredibly well with their investment into small power substations. So when we had a disaster, we still were able to get power to the ratepayers. But if we're starting to, or they are, because we're all in one big family. If we're going to start really investing in the infrastructure and we can't get a return on it, when does Orion start becoming a burden on the ratepayers? And that's what I'm concerned about.
And that's that's why we need to dive deeper into that. But I think the alignment of the capital investment to the price path is critical.
Yes.
Yeah, particularly given that that capital investment will be funded off Orion's balance sheet.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Councillor Fields.
Thank you, Melanie. Kia ora, Brian. Good to have you in here. I'm just noting your comments about the port and the potential growth there, and sort of having to sort of figure out what the demand looks like. So obviously, to get freight movements out of the port, you've got the road constraint and you've got the rail constraint. So I'm just sort of interested to what sort of level you're kind of going to look at those freight movement constraints and your overall kind of view of how the port, what the future demand looks like there in terms of getting the freight from the ships to the inland port and beyond, obviously. So yeah, that's a big challenge for not necessarily things we control. Like we don't control the state highway, we don't control the rail network either. But obviously we've got an interest in those things being top notch.
Yes, I certainly know that the Brougham Street has been identified as a challenge by the transport industry generally. With all of these things, you've got to be mindful of the full supply chain, and you have to be mindful of ensuring that you're not investing simply to move a constraint. So our deep dive will be to understand the full picture, not just the picture as it relates portside.
Councillor Kieran.
Yeah, mine was just around Orion and any wiggle room they have. So we've had an issue for a number of years around large trees, streetline trees, the really nice ones, and then they get butchered every year, so the power lines don't get affected by the trees, which is a bit of a problem. And I've been alerted to a street in the last couple of weeks that's going to have its trees removed because of the power lines, big trees. Would Orion have room to underground 1 or 2 streets a year, or not at this point?
I'd have to take that on notice, unless, Matt, do you have that insight?
No, look, I don't know what their plans are with respect to undergrounding lines, so I'd have to take the question away and ask them.
Certainly all the community boards will be able to feed in a list of streets and stuff on which ones are the most affected. But if there was a program to underground 1 or 2 streets a year, would make a huge difference, especially as we're trying to green the city more, not de-green it, and big trees, some of these. So that'd be very helpful.
Yeah, happy to take it away.
Just on there, undergrounding also limits tree planting too, so to consider. Yeah. Are there any more questions on this first part? Okay, you can carry on. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Just to inform you that the final dividend for FY24 has been paid, which is good news. The SOI budgets and business plans have been finalised, and all the subs and CCHL SOIs which are about to be submitted all reflect the letters of expectation and the feedback that was received from the draft SOIs. The CEO recruitment for CCHL is in progress. The previous board had made a decision to go to market to search for a new permanent chief executive. The new board has reconfirmed that direction and has initiated the process. We have engaged Carriage Partners to undertake that assignment for CCHL. At our board meeting last Friday, the board signed off on the assignment specification, and now we've asked Carriage, before they step out into the market, we've asked them to connect with the subsidiary company chief executives, with your own acting chief executive and the chief executive of Christchurch, New Zealand, to get their feedback on ideal candidate profile characteristics and also any potential candidate leads. Once that's done, then we'll be in the market from about the second week of July, and we anticipate that that process will take through to the end of September, early October, where we'll be in a position to, hopefully be in a position to make an appointment. When I became involved a month ago, I was concerned about the potential for loss of institutional knowledge. Paul Silk's been serving in the role as acting chief executive for about 20 months now, and has encountered some pretty extraordinary circumstances during that time. But Paul is very committed to CCHL and to the city, and he is very committed to see through some of the important work streams that we've got in front of us and to maintain momentum around that. So Paul and CCHL have agreed that he will remain in the role as acting chief executive through to the 28th of February next year. We anticipate being able to make an appointment by early October, but with notice periods and Christmas time, we would expect that the most likely commencement date will be 1st of February. So that dovetails quite nicely and ensures that there's a smooth transition, and Paul's very keen to ensure that as well. So we've been well served there over the next 9 months while we move to appoint a permanent chief executive. And just on the board and the board subcommittees, the board at its meeting last week just reset the board subcommittees. I'm chairing the governance and appointments subcommittee, and our CCHL deputy chair Gil Cox is chairing our impact committee. We have also appointed an independent chair of our audit and risk committee, Mike Rondell, who's known to many of you, I think. And as far as the board is concerned, we intend to appoint a further director. We're just giving some consideration to exactly reviewing our skills matrix and giving some consideration to exactly what we need. But we will plan to have a new director in place prior to the annual meeting in November. And then we'll take stock and see again whether or not we feel that we're missing any material skills around that table, and to what extent we might need a further director. But we're just going to take it one at a time at this stage.
I'll just briefly cover off some of these further aspects, noting that the previous person to sit in this chair was talking about bringing the next Taylor Swift to Christchurch, and I'm talking about deferred tax. So I'll try not to lose you there. So dividends were received from the subsidiaries, broadly in line with the projections, and I was pleased to hit the button on the payment to council this morning in respect of the additional of the final dividend for the year, as Brian said. That reflects 5 of our 6 subsidiaries that are tracking at or above their operating budget. Orion's had a positive year. It closed out its 12 months on 31st of March, despite probably some challenges really with respect to those copper thefts that we've talked to in the past, which is sort of $1 million number in terms of the cost of that alone. Christchurch Airport, had a good seasonal summer service. I've seen some, despite the passenger numbers not quite being where we hoped them to be in the budget. I think there were a couple of announcements this week in respect of the Jetstar services to Cairns. Increased frequency of the Hong Kong Cathay Pacific route going to 4 a week, I believe. So some really positive signs there in terms of some of those international routes getting back up to their pre-COVID levels, and the property portfolio performed well year to date. Enable's really just a continuation of the year-to-date story regarding numbers tracking slightly ahead of budget and margins there, and so really happy with the results that are coming through on the Enable side, whilst City Care is also at or about budget, and the Spencer Henshaw aspect of that business is performing slightly ahead of expectations in the original business case, but we're all fully aware of the challenges there with respect to budgets and central government with respect to its main customer in that business. Littleton's soft volumes, I guess we've previously talked about the challenges in respect of the Red Sea and the logistics, and that saw probably the first half of this year, first half of the financial year, volumes a little bit soft. Positively, sort of February and March, we're back in line with the expectations, and we're sort of hitting our revised expectations of our volume. So I know the team's doing a lot of work in terms of that right now, in terms of what the outlook is for next year. But really a continuation of the themes that we've previously talked to at this table. Deferred tax expense, so very exciting. A legislative change in respect of the allowance for depreciation on buildings is going to give rise to a significant non-cash negative number through the P&L this year. I repeat, non-cash, legislative-based, and doesn't actually impact on the dividends that we actually project to pay in the future. But appreciate there's a lot of potential headline noise around the profit, which will be consistent with other property-owning companies, which will be consistent with other airports. So there's nothing exceptional about what's going to come through our accounts. I think we've previously flagged this deferred tax expense, which is going to come through, but I just repeat it here. That will reflect will impact a number of the subsidiaries, including the group results at an NPAT level, but doesn't actually have any practical change to the business. So probably enough on deferred tax. Leave the rest to the tax experts, which are having a great time debating that. Onto our intellectual capital. A pretty busy period. 7 director vacancies being filled, or coming to council at least for recommendation to be filled. Board effectiveness reviews completed. And what was talked about at our last board meeting was just where we go with the associate director program, which is just working to optimise the timing regarding that, and perhaps provide a bit more longevity to some of those appointments regarding that. And gender pay gap, I know that's been a point that's been outstanding for a while, and I understand that data is coming together for the year-end review. Health and safety is always front of mind, and I guess we get some pretty shocking headline numbers in terms of incidents and issues, and I guess probably to give some perspective to that, I think there were 24 fire extinguishers, 53 batteries, 103 gas cylinders that went through the recycling plant at Eco Central, and they have a number of incidents, and I spent a little bit of time there recently with the team, and it is a genuine challenge for operating that business, managing the health and safety and keeping the team that frankly processes an extraordinary amount of recycling out there. When you get up front and close to it and see it in action. So Yeah, look, I just want to acknowledge that, and the team is doing everything they can, but there is a big challenge there regarding contamination of the product that they receive. So, various other aspects. Our Hui Huanui program is ongoing. Some te reo development. Matariki is obviously highly topical this particular week, and efforts there to upskill the group in terms of te reo, and particularly across all the subsidiaries really, and CCHL is taking a leadership position with respect to that program. Carbon is probably the focus under the natural capital aspect of our business, and the challenge at the year end is there's a lot of counting, there's auditing, there's emissions reductions plans, there's climate related disclosures that we've got to produce, and the FMA just recently acknowledged that it's quite a complex challenge for a portfolio of companies to bring that together and present what is a group perspective on climate related disclosures. So we're working through that. It's new for us in this first year where we're mandatory reporting entity. But yeah, that's a focus for us. But really, in many respects, I want to turn the attention to what are we doing in terms of achieving better outcomes in terms of our Scope 1, our Scope 2 emissions, and achieving science-based targets, and reporting that back to you. And I understand we've got a session in October that will provide some more colour to that in due course. So probably enough from me. I'll pause there, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, Councillor McAllen.
Thanks, Brian. It seems like it's all going pretty well, really, for 1 month, and you're doing a lot of great work and solving some issues for us. You mentioned about appointing one person to your board. I mean, we had, was it 3 or 4 vacancies come up recently? How has the figure of one been arrived at, or is that just one at the moment and you're looking to make others down the line?
Yeah, we just want to take it slowly. There's no rush. We've got good capability around the table as it stands, and as we sort of deepen some of the dives into the areas that we've identified for getting that better understanding, we may identify skill gaps around our table that we want to fill. So we think if we move on with one now, the board's yet to have that discussion about the skills matrix and what skills we'll prioritise for this first appointment. But we'll do that over the next few months and then make that first appointment. But there may well be more to follow, but that's the starting point.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think the other thing, we're dealing with infrastructure assets here. I wouldn't call it dynamic by any means. So we do have such an opportunity to take our time and to be very careful and considered in our decision making. We don't have to rush, and that's such a benefit to be in that position.
I've got a question. I've got a few questions. First one is, with the strategic review, we didn't follow through with some of the aspects of that included in the infrastructure table here, those SOI measures. I was just wondering, with the value strategy, is that still something that would be worthwhile working through together between Council and CCHL?
Yeah, look, I came in at the sort of the back end of the value strategy, and I understand it was something that councillors were working through as part of the workshops, and yeah, happy to engage with council as part of that. I understand it was a council initiative regarding articulating the value strategy and how CCHL can contribute to that. So happy to pick that up in partnership with council if it's something that is desired.
Mm-hmm. It'll be good for councils to discuss that in some way if you can figure out how we do that. Councillor Hanson, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your report. Just had a question about health and safety at the port. We're told that there's been 4 incidences at LPC, no injuries, but obviously, there's been a bit of a history at the port over quite a few years now around cultural and well-being in terms of staff. So I'm just wondering, are you getting any reporting on progress around addressing those culture issues that the former, well, probably the successive CEs at the port have said that they are addressing, but we don't seem to have any visibility of how that's being measured and how we can have confidence in what's happening in terms of the culture, and obviously health and safety is a key part of that.
I think that flows through to the comments I made about the quarterly reporting and the transparency and insights that could be enhanced through the reporting. In terms of any information that we're receiving, I'll leave Matt to comment on that. But we have prioritised engagement with the port. Matt and I were at the port on Monday afternoon with the chief executive and 4 members of the executive team, and they spoke to the what they would describe as their transformation program. They spoke to how health and safety is at the very heart of that program, and we have some confidence coming out of those discussions that that is the priority for the port: health and safety and the culture associated with that, and well-being in support of that as well.
Yeah, and then it's a little bit hard to see, but there's a directional chart regarding the lost time injury severity rate that I've got from LPC, and it, I think you can tell from there that it's definitely going changed substantially over the last couple of years, and it's gone in the right direction. So I guess there's a metrics element to this that appears to be okay, but I guess it's a little bit dangerous relying on the neat metrics and the numbers, because they're always influenced by other things and reporting and that sort of thing. So there's a cultural element to this that has to be worked on, and I know that's front of mind, but the metrics appear to be, certainly at face value, going in the right direction.
I think that's just a comment on that too, is that the reporting is one thing, but getting out, being with people, talking to people, having the conversations, that's where the real insight comes from. And, we have the opportunity to do that. It's a big part of our role. And we'll be doing more and more of that, and that will help us provide greater insight back to you.
That's good. Just two further questions. One was the Associate Director program has been put on hold. Do we have a date for that restarting? I thought that was one of the a real positive thing that CCHL was doing.
Yeah.
So are you able just to give us a bit of a understanding about why it was put on hold and what the plans are going forward?
I'm not familiar with the reason for why it was put on hold.
I guess there's a couple of aspects here. One is resetting and working up the Christchurch City Holdings Board and getting that settled and working with Brian and the new board. And the other part of it really is around some feedback we got from the last cohort regarding the timing of when these appointments are made and how long they go for. So I think it's going to be more like an 18-month sort of process in terms of the appointment, and when that starts is kind of a crucial element, and crossing over financial year ends and when's a good time to induct associates into it. So by on hold, it's really a deferral and just optimising when we actually do it is probably the key point there. Yeah.
And just in terms of specific companies, I had 2 very specific questions about the companies, and I don't know if it's better to raise it with you now and get a response later, but just to flag. Was really interested around the environmental, around what progress has been made around the cruise ship request that we made as a council around looking at some sort of environmental levy to offset the impact that they were having, both from emissions and sustainability. And then the second one was specifically in regards to the airport expanding its food offerings. Just kind of, I guess, a bit of a question around, we've heard that the passenger numbers have dipped or as forecast, and it just a kind of question around what controls do we have around non-essential spending at the moment, given we're so capitally constrained?
Yeah, I think I can comment on that. I think there's a heightened awareness across the group, and we'll continue to reinforce it around the use of capital. In relation to the airport announcement around the terminal upgrade, which came out, I think, last week. My expectation was that would be a cash flow positive announcement in year one, and I've subsequently confirmed that with the airport. So the airport had the retail environment at the airport has not been the airport design was not necessarily fabulous for retail, but the upgrade that's been undertaken, not all of that capital has come from the airport. So I think it's comforting to know that it's cash flow positive in year one.
Okay, we've got Councillor Fields.
Kia ora. Brian, just getting back to the port there, do you have any concerns about the relationship between the workforce and the executive management team at the port at the moment?
Not something that I've picked up on in the limited engagement so far. It seems to me that there's been some very positive steps made in the relationship in support of improving the culture, and particularly in support of putting health and safety at the centre of their transformation efforts.
Councillor Barber.
Thanks, Brian, Matt, for coming along, and thanks for steadying the ship. It's much appreciated. I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about how comfortable you are with CCHL overall debt. Is that something that you can expand upon? Because I understand it's $2.4 billion
2.3.
on assets of 5.3, something like that.
Yeah, they're the rough numbers. I guess the challenge, various debt numbers get talked about. And at a really simplistic level, there's sort of $600 million that the shareholder, CCHL, carries and services in its own right. So that gets paid out of the dividends from the subsidiaries, and so reduces the dividend to council at the end of the day. That's quite simply how it works. There's a challenge there because that interest bill has to be paid before we pay a dividend to council, and when you do the maths, it just adds to volatility of the leftover in the pot in order to pay council. So, the absolute amount itself, we're well within our covenants, well within our financial covenants, not at risk of breaching those based on our actuals or projections. So in that respect, it's a manageable debt number from a pure covenant compliance perspective, and our ability to access the market, including through council as part of the LGFA funding sources, and in terms of our public bonds, we're well supported there. So you can look at it in a number of lenses, and in a perfect world, less debt would be an absolutely wonderful outcome. But at this very point in time, we're compliant with our covenants, and comfortable that our dividends from the subsidiaries are actually can support that.
Okay, and just a little follow-up. So in terms of the assets, I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, that the value of the assets has grown by 600 million, is it, over the last year or two? Does that ring a bell at all?
Dangerous for me to quote a number right here, so not 100% sure. But you sound about right. Right, there's been a significant capital growth through the portfolio, property revaluations and things like that, which would give rise to that sort of number. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
I think there was a lot of there has been some public conversation about the potential or the projected growth in debt over the next 10 years. I would note that conversation has taken place without the context of the growth in the asset value over the 10 years as well. But the debt overall over the next 10 years is projected to decrease. The increasing element is the Orion debt that will be required to support their asset management plan. Right. But as we talked about earlier, that's the return on that is going to be linked to a regulated price path, so it's less risky than normal debt, if you like. So, but the parent company debt and the rest of the group debt over the next 10 years is projected to decrease, leaving aside the Orion component.
So, if it's a house, the house is increasing in value substantially, and we are slowly paying off the mortgage, so to speak.
Yeah,
Despite might having to replace the roof at some stage.
Yeah, our very base case projections have us repaying some of that parent debt over time, at a moderate pace. The challenge is their base case projections are always wrong, and I guess don't need to tell anyone at this table the risk of shock, black swan events. That's the challenge that you face with an infrastructure asset intensive portfolio and what that might mean. There are always challenges, and things like insurance are present ever increasing challenges for us, and how we manage that is probably a real focus for us over the next 10 years. But those base case projections certainly have us repaying the house, as you say, slightly.
Without
Slowly over
selling
time.
the garage, yeah, good point. Can I just ask one more? So, obviously, we're involved in infrastructure. Do you ever see a day where we might be able to look at investing in other areas? It's, aerospace, water bottling, whatever, something outside the infrastructure, the current infrastructure sort of portfolio we have. Yeah, a new member of the family, as Tim has so eloquently put it.
Well, we had a new member of the family. It's Harold's and Abel.
Oh, it's only 10 years. Yeah.
10 years.
Yeah.
So there is a precedent for it, and a very successful one, I might add. Right now, I think our focus is on the risks and opportunities around the existing portfolio, and I think that's important that we dig in on that. Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. But you're open to the idea, should opportunities come up. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? We've got PX as well after this. So, thank you very much for this public portion of us working with you today. And thanks for the positive comment about enable, because I completely agree, not all councillors do. So thank you for doing that in public. I'll move that we receive the report. Does someone want to second that? We've got Kelly Barber seconding. All those in favour say aye. Any against? And that's carried.